My name is Elara, and I am 27 years old. The story I am about to share happened on the day of my wedding. It was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. Back then, I believed I knew everything about my family. I believed I knew who I was. I was wrong. That morning, I woke up before sunrise. My heart was beating fast, but not from fear. I was excited to marry Daniel. We had been together for 3 years. He was kind, patient, and always made me feel safe. I truly believed I was starting a perfect new chapter of my life. My mother helped me get ready. She adjusted my white dress and fixed my hair carefully. She kept looking at me in a strange way. At first, I thought she was just emotional. Many mothers cry at their daughter's wedding, but she did not cry. She looked nervous. Her hands were cold when she touched my shoulders. I asked her if she was okay. She smiled quickly and said she was just tired. I did not think too much about it. The ceremony was held in a beautiful garden. White flowers were everywhere. Friends and family filled the chairs. I could hear soft music playing as I waited for my turn to walk down the aisle. My father stood beside me. He looked proud and happy. When the doors opened, everyone turned to look at me. I felt like I was in a dream. Daniel was standing at the front, smiling. I focused only on him. Halfway down the aisle, something caught my attention. A woman was standing near the back. She was not sitting like the other guests. She was standing very still, holding her purse tightly. She was not smiling. Her eyes were full of tears. I did not recognize her face. She was not a friend. She was not a relative. I had never seen her before in my life. But she was looking at me as if she knew me very well. For a second, I almost stopped walking. My father gently squeezed my arm, and I continued forward. I told myself it did not matter. Maybe she was a guest of Daniel's family. Maybe she was just emotional. Still, something about her made my chest feel tight. During the vows, I tried to focus on Daniel's voice, but I could feel her eyes on me the entire time. When the ceremony ended and everyone began celebrating, I saw her again. This time, she was walking toward me. My smile slowly faded. She stopped only a few steps away from me. Her hands were shaking. She looked at me and said quietly, "We need to talk." At that moment, I had no idea that my whole life was about to change. She stood in front of me while the music and laughter continued behind us. No one else seemed to notice the tension between us. I looked at her face carefully. She looked tired, but not old, maybe in her mid-40s. Her eyes were red as if she had been crying for hours. I forced a polite smile and asked if we had met before. She shook her head slowly. She said no, we had never met. Then she said something that made my stomach twist. She said she had waited many years for this day. I did not understand what she meant. I told her this was not the right time. It was my wedding day. If she had a problem, she could speak to my parents. When I said the word parents, her lips trembled. She glanced across the garden toward my mother. My mother was frozen in place, staring at us. The color had drained from her face. I felt a wave of confusion. I asked the woman again who she was. She took a deep breath and said her name was Mara. She said she did not want to ruin my wedding. She said she just could not stay silent anymore. I felt annoyed. I told her clearly that she was being inappropriate. My husband was greeting guests, and people were beginning to look at us. But Mara did not move. She said she only needed 5 minutes alone with me. Something in her voice was not angry or cruel. It was desperate. That scared me more than anger would have. Against my better judgment, I agreed to speak with her away from the crowd. We walked toward a quiet corner of the garden near a large tree. My heart was beating so loudly I could barely hear the music anymore. I crossed my arms and asked her to explain quickly. She looked at my face as if she was memorizing every detail. Then she said the words that made my world tilt. She said, "I gave birth to you." I laughed, not because it was funny, but because it sounded impossible. I told her she was confused. I told her my mother was standing only a few meters away. I said she must have mistaken me for someone else. But Mara shook her head firmly. She said she was 17 when she became pregnant. Her family was strict and ashamed. They forced her to give the baby away. She said she never even held the child. She never saw her face. She was told the baby would go to a good home. My ears were ringing. I told her to stop. I said this was cruel and disrespectful. She began to cry harder. She said she had spent years searching. She had finally found records that led her to my parents. She said she came today because she saw my wedding announcement online. She said she only wanted to see me once in her life. I felt my hands shaking. I told her she was lying. She reached into her purse and pulled out a small envelope. Inside were copies of old hospital papers. The name of the hospital where I was supposedly born was printed clearly at the top. The date matched my birthday exactly. I stared at the paper but refused to believe it. Anyone could fake documents. I told her this proved nothing. She nodded and said she expected that. Then she said something that made my breath stop. She said my mother knew the truth. I turned my head slowly toward my mother. She was still watching us. When our eyes met, she looked away immediately. My chest felt tight. I told Mara she was trying to destroy my family. I said she should leave before I called security. She did not argue. She only said that if I ever wanted the truth, I could take a DNA test. She wrote her phone number on a small piece of paper and handed it to me. Her fingers were cold when they touched mine. Before I could respond, my mother suddenly appeared beside us. Her voice was shaking as she told Mara to leave immediately. She said this was harassment. Guests were starting to whisper. Daniel walked toward us, confused. I felt trapped between them all. Mara looked at my mother with deep sadness and said she had stayed silent for 27 years. She said she could not stay silent anymore. Then she walked away slowly through the garden gate. Everything around me felt unreal. The music continued. People were laughing and taking photos. But I felt like I was underwater. Daniel asked me what was happening. I told him I did not know. My mother grabbed my hand tightly and said the woman was unstable. She said we should forget about it and return to the celebration. I searched her face for answers, but she avoided my eyes. For the rest of the reception, I smiled for photos and greeted guests, but my mind was somewhere else. Every time I looked at my mother, I remembered Mara's words. I gave birth to you. The sentence repeated in my head like an echo. I tried to convince myself it was nonsense. My parents had always loved me. They had cared for me, supported me, protected me. Why would they lie? That night, after the guests left and Daniel and I were finally alone, he asked me again about the stranger. I showed him the hospital papers. He read them carefully and looked serious. He said the dates were too exact to ignore. He gently suggested that we ask my parents directly. I felt fear rising inside me. What if it was true? What if everything I believed about my life was incomplete? I could not sleep. I lay awake next to my husband, staring at the ceiling. My wedding day had turned into a question mark. Around midnight, I quietly picked up my phone and looked at the small piece of paper with Mara's number. My hands trembled. I did not know whether I wanted answers or peace, but I knew one thing. Nothing would ever feel simple again. The next morning, I could not pretend anymore. My wedding dress was hanging near the window, bright and beautiful, but it no longer felt magical. It felt heavy. Daniel watched me quietly while I drank my coffee without tasting it. He did not push me, but I could see the concern in his eyes. Finally, he said gently that we deserved the truth. I knew he was right. I picked up my phone and called my mother. My voice was calm, but my hands were shaking. I asked her to come over. I told her we needed to talk. She arrived an hour later. She looked like she had not slept at all. My father was not with her. That alone made my heart beat faster. She sat on the couch and avoided looking at me. The silence in the room felt louder than any argument. I asked her one simple question. I asked if the woman at my wedding was telling the truth. My mother's eyes filled with tears immediately. She tried to speak, but no words came out at first. Then she whispered something I will never forget. She said yes. It felt like the ground disappeared under my feet. I stared at her, waiting for her to take it back, to say she was confused, but she did not. She told me that she and my father could not have children. They had tried for years. They prayed. They waited. They hoped. Nothing happened. Then, one day, a distant relative told them about a young pregnant girl who needed help. The girl did not want to keep the baby. My parents agreed to adopt the child before it was even born. That child was me. My mother said they brought me home when I was only 3 days old. She said they loved me from the first second they saw me. She said they never told me because they were afraid. Afraid I would feel different. Afraid I would search for someone else. Afraid I would stop calling her mom. She cried while explaining all of this. She kept saying she only wanted to protect me. I listened without speaking. My heart was broken, but not in the way I expected. I was not angry that I was adopted. I was angry that I was never told. My whole life felt like a story with missing pages. I asked her why she chose my wedding day to let the truth come out. She said she did not know the woman would appear. She thought the past was buried forever. Daniel sat beside me and held my hand. He asked calmly if my father knew that Mara might come. My mother nodded. She admitted that Mara had contacted them months ago. She wanted to meet me, but my parents refused. They told her it would only cause pain. They begged her to stay away. My chest tightened when I heard that. This had been happening behind my back, and I had no idea. After my mother left, I felt empty. Daniel asked what I wanted to do next. I looked at Mara's number again. For years, I believed I knew my beginning. Now I was not sure. I kept thinking about her face at the wedding. She did not look dangerous. She looked heartbroken. I wondered what it must feel like to carry a baby for 9 months and never see her again. That afternoon, I made a decision. I sent Mara a message. I wrote only 3 words. "We need proof." She replied within minutes. She said she understood completely. She said she was ready for a DNA test any time. She had nothing to hide. My stomach twisted as I read her message. This was becoming real. There was no going back to ignorance. A week later, I sat in a small medical office with Daniel beside me. Mara was sitting across from us. The room felt cold and quiet. She looked nervous but hopeful. We barely spoke. The nurse explained the process and took samples from both of us. It was quick and simple, but it felt like the most important moment of my life. After it was done, we were told the results would take 2 weeks. 2 long weeks. When we walked out of the building, Mara stopped me. She said she did not want to replace anyone. She knew my parents raised me. She only wanted to know if I was truly her daughter. I nodded slowly. I did not promise anything. The waiting was unbearable. Every day felt heavier than the one before. I kept looking at my childhood photos, searching for signs I had never noticed. Did I look like my mother? Did I have my father's smile? Suddenly, I was not sure. I began to question small details about myself. My dark hair, my eyes, my smile. Who did they come from? At night, I lay awake thinking about identity. If the DNA test was positive, what would that change? Would I feel different? Would I love my parents less? The questions circled in my mind without answers. Daniel remained patient. He reminded me that love is not created by blood alone. Still, I needed to know. Finally, the call came. The results were ready. My heart was pounding as we drove to the clinic. My hands felt cold. I knew that in a few minutes, I would either close this chapter forever or open a completely new one. The nurse handed me a sealed envelope. I stared at my name printed on the front. My entire life seemed to rest inside that thin piece of paper. I took a deep breath, and I opened it. I unfolded the paper slowly, my hands trembling so much I thought I might drop it. The letters inside stared back at me like a mirror reflecting everything I had not known about myself. My eyes scanned the words, and I felt my breath leave my body. The DNA test confirmed it. Mara was telling the truth. I was her daughter. My chest tightened, and tears filled my eyes. I could hear Daniel quietly exhale beside me, his hand resting gently on mine, steadying me as if I were about to fall apart. I felt dizzy. My whole life had been built on the love of my parents, and yet here was a hidden truth, one that had been waiting for decades to surface. Mara reached across the table and placed her hand on mine. Her touch was gentle, nervous, full of fear and hope at the same time. She whispered, "I'm so sorry, I waited too long." I could not speak. My mind was a storm. I wanted to scream, cry, hug her, push her away, and understand all at once. Daniel gave me a small, encouraging nod. I knew he was telling me I could take my time. I asked her why she came to the wedding. Why now? She told me that she had searched for me for years, but my parents had always refused contact. She said she had no intention to ruin my life, only to finally meet the daughter she had never held. I wanted to believe her, but the hurt was still there, quiet and heavy in my chest. I looked at my parents' faces. They had come to the clinic after hearing from Daniel. My father's hands were shaking, and my mother's eyes were wet. They did not say a word. They only waited. Mara explained everything in detail. She told me about the choices she had made as a teenager, about how she had been scared, alone, and forced by circumstances to give me away. She said she had hoped I would be happy, safe, and loved, and she had always known I was. I listened, nodding slowly, but my emotions were tangled. Gratitude, anger, confusion, sadness, they all blended into one. I felt my childhood flash before my eyes, every memory now reframed by this new information. For days after that, I could not focus on anything. Every time I looked at my parents, I felt both love and betrayal. Every time I thought about Mara, I felt the ache of years lost. Daniel tried to comfort me, reminding me that the love my parents gave me had never been fake. But what about the years I could have had with Mara? What about the questions I had never asked? I felt like a puzzle with missing pieces suddenly dropped on the floor. Then came the moment I had been dreading, meeting Mara alone. We agreed to meet at a quiet cafe, somewhere neutral. I arrived first and sat by the window, my hands wrapped around a cup of tea I could not taste. When she walked in, I froze. She looked smaller than I expected, as if the weight of 27 years had shrunk her. Her eyes searched mine for any sign of anger or rejection. I wanted to be angry, but instead, I felt a strange pull toward her. She sat down slowly, and for a few minutes, we said nothing. The noise of the cafe surrounded us, but in that small space between us, there was only silence and the weight of our shared past. Finally, I asked the question that had been burning inside me. Why now? Why my wedding? Her eyes filled with tears again. She said she could not live with the regret any longer. She said she had always hoped I would find her one day, but she had no right to interfere. My wedding announcement on social media had been the last piece of luck she needed to reach me. I looked at her for a long time. I wanted to scream. I wanted to hug her. I wanted to tell her that everything was okay, and I wanted to tell her that it was not. She was silent, waiting. I could see that she was not asking for forgiveness, only recognition, only a chance to be seen by the child she had carried and lost. Slowly, I reached out and took her hand. It was soft, warm, and trembling. The feeling was surreal. I felt the connection, fragile but real. I whispered, "I don't know what to feel." She nodded, squeezing my hand gently. She said that was okay. She said it was enough just to meet me, that I was enough. In the following weeks, we started to communicate carefully. Phone calls at first, short and hesitant, then longer conversations, sharing small details about our lives. I learned about Mara's fears, her dreams, and the life she had lived while missing me. I shared my life with her as well, my childhood memories, my wedding, my work, the friends I had loved. Every story was heavy with emotion, but slowly the weight became lighter. Daniel was supportive, quietly listening and giving me space to process everything. He never pressured me to accept Mara fully. He only reminded me that my life was mine, and I could decide how much of the past I wanted to let in. And slowly, I began to see Mara not as a stranger, but as a part of my story. A piece I had never known, but one I could now hold gently in my mind. One evening, Mara suggested we take a photo together, just the two of us. I hesitated, but Daniel encouraged me to do it. Standing side by side, we smiled awkwardly at first. Then something shifted. It was not perfect, and it was not easy, but it was real. The camera clicked, and for the first time in decades, Mara felt like she had a daughter. I felt like I had a mother I had never known. The DNA test, the wedding, the hidden truth, it had all brought chaos. But slowly, the chaos became understanding. I realized that life does not have simple answers. Love can be both complicated and powerful. Families can be chosen, created, and discovered. And sometimes, the past finds its way back, not to ruin the present, but to show us a new part of ourselves we never knew existed. The weeks turned into months, and Mara became a quiet presence in my life. We did not rush. We did not force a mother-daughter bond overnight. Instead, we took small steps. Sometimes we met for coffee. Sometimes she came to my apartment, and we cooked together while sharing stories. Daniel was always supportive, quietly making space for the new dynamic in our lives. At first, I still felt strange calling her mom, but slowly it felt natural. I realized that love was not just about blood. It was also about choice, care, and time spent together. One afternoon, I invited my parents, Mara and Daniel, to the park. I wanted everyone to be together, in a safe space, without arguments, without judgment. My parents were nervous, but they smiled when they saw Mara. Mara was nervous too, but her hands were steady this time. We talked, laughed softly, and shared memories. I saw something in my mother's eyes that I had never noticed before. Relief. She had always loved me, but now she could love Mara too, without fear. My father nodded at Mara, a small gesture, but it meant the world. Slowly, I began to understand the twists of life. The stranger who came to my wedding had not come to destroy my world. She had come to reveal a piece of it I had never known. And once I accepted that, I felt lighter. I realized that keeping secrets had not been my fault. I had done nothing wrong. All I could do was embrace the truth and move forward. Mara had carried a heavy burden for decades. I decided that if she had shown courage to find me, I could show courage to accept her. Daniel held my hand one evening as we sat on the balcony. The city lights twinkled around us, and I felt peace for the first time in weeks. I realized that life is full of surprises, some painful, some beautiful. What mattered was not what had happened in the past, but how we chose to live now. I had my parents, my husband, and a new connection with Mara. I had learned that family is not only about blood, but about honesty, forgiveness, and the love we give each other. When I saw Mara one last time before she returned to her city, I hugged her tightly. I whispered, "You are part of me now." She smiled through her tears and said, "And you are part of me, always." I felt a warmth spread through my chest that I had never known before. The stranger at my wedding was no longer a stranger. She was my mother, a part of my story I would never forget. Life continued, slowly and beautifully. I kept my wedding memories, but now they were mixed with the knowledge of my beginnings. I learned that the past always finds its way back, not to hurt us, but to teach us, to complete the pieces of our lives. Daniel, Mara, and my parents became a new kind of family. We were imperfect, complicated, and human. But we were together. Years later, I would think back to that day at my wedding, when a stranger walked in and changed everything. At first, I had wanted to turn away, to hide from the truth. But when I accepted it, I found a new part of myself, a part that could love more, forgive more, and understand more. The past was still there, but it no longer controlled me. Instead, it guided me to a fuller life, a life where secrets became bridges instead of walls. I smiled as I closed the photo album that now held pictures of my wedding, Mara, my parents, and Daniel. I had learned the hardest lesson of all. The past cannot be ignored, but it can be embraced. Love, truth, and forgiveness can heal what seems impossible. And I knew, deep in my heart, that I was stronger than I had ever imagined. Thanks for listening to my story. If you liked it, subscribe to Cozy English Story, drop a comment, and tell me where you are listening from.